One of the most popular anime airing right now is Dandadan, and it's a series that I've continually hyped up. But as the anime's dropped, I've had a couple people ask me if Christians specifically should watch it, which is what I'm going to break down in this video. For starters, why would Christians be hesitant to watch this series in the first place? Well, that lies in the contents of the show. As I've mentioned before in other videos, Dandadan has a wacky premise that heavily centers not just around aliens, but also the supernatural, which is where I can understand some hesitation comes in. Anytime spirits or anything remotely supernatural pops up, especially in anime, the Christian crowd is very quick to call it demonic or satanic. Now, in today's culture, there is ample reason to be skeptical of demonic things. It's popping up in a lot of different forms of media, from movies to music, and yes, even some anime. But this is where I challenge you to take a little bit of a deeper look than just at the surface level. For Dandadan specifically, a lot of the spirits are based on Japanese folklore, and the aliens are based more on Western cryptids. These things aren't inherently demonic, it's more about the presentation of it, and I don't think that's the way this show specifically is leaning. You could argue that Okarun using spirit powers encourages people to do the same, but I would refute that by lumping it in the same vein as something like Harry Potter. The Bible says witchcraft is evil and that Christians shouldn't practice it, which is very true, but you're not gonna go to hell just for watching Harry Potter. The key element here is that Harry Potter and Dandadan are both fictional pieces of media, and that's a very important thing to keep in mind. You can stand in your room all day going Leviosa as long as you remember that it's not real. Nothing is actually gonna start floating around. The same goes for Dandadan. You can pretend you've got Momo's psychic powers all day as long as you keep that firm distinction between fiction and reality. And another great way to take that is when you walk up to an automated door and you put your hand out to use the force. You know it's not real, but it's still fun to do, you know? Now, an aspect of the series I think relates more to our Christian walk is the idea of spiritual warfare and how it's literally right in front of our faces. Momo and Okarun both insist that spirits and aliens aren't real, only to find out that both are very real and have been lurking around them the whole time, and this becomes increasingly apparent as the series moves forward, and something that I personally picked up on as I read the manga. Most normal people in the Dandadan universe are totally oblivious to the supernatural things that's happening around them. It's only those like Momo and Okarun who notice and understand these things. The same can be said for the real world. Most non-Christians don't know how to recognize the spiritual aspects of the world around them, but we as Christians do. We also know that there's nothing we can do in our own power. Outside of God, we have no ability to combat spiritual warfare. And Dandadan is the same way. Outside of the powers they've been gifted, Momo and Okarun have no real way to combat the supernatural forces in their world. Okay, I tried to make that not sound too sermon-y, I promise. Now, outside of that, let's talk about some of the other aspects of Dandadan. I will say that first episode can be quite off-putting to some people, especially because of the content towards the end. Momo ends up kidnapped by aliens and gets stripped down, which is a scene that's been quick to be labeled as fan service. Honestly, I wouldn't consider this scene fan service at all, especially when you consider the full context of the episode. First of all, this scene is playing into the whole concept of aliens probing people, which is weird no matter how you slice it. Secondly, this scene isn't a look how hot Momo is, it's a genuinely desperate scene where something terrible is about to happen. If it makes you feel uncomfortable, then that's a good thing. This is an awkward and, quite frankly, terrible situation for her to be in. And as soon as she's out of the UFO, Okarun gives her his shirt so she can cover herself up, which is a very gentlemanly thing to do. And I just want you to ask yourself this. If the roles were reversed, would it be okay? Would it be just a funny joke if Okarun was strapped down instead of Momo? And if the answer is yes, then I think you missed the whole point. This is also a really big character moment for Momo, since it's where she's confronted with the harsh reality that she was wrong and the supernatural does exist, thus awakening her powers to fight against it. Another aspect of the show that I think the Christian would enjoy is how Momo and Okarun were both bullied and ridiculed for what they believed in. Let me cook here, let me cook. Momo gave in to the peer pressure and rejected the whole idea of psychic powers. She knows that spirits are vaguely real in some sense, but never fully commits to it, which is a very agnostic type stance. Okarun, on the other hand, held true to his belief in aliens despite being mocked for it, and it didn't matter what evidence people threw at him or brought to the table because you just could not persuade him that aliens weren't real. Now, his longing for companionship was a bit misplaced, at least until he met Momo, but the idea still stands. Like I mentioned earlier, the alien encounter is Momo's big moment of realization, but also one for Okarun. After finally meeting aliens in person, he has to face the reality that his idolatry of them was misplaced, and that's when he begins to find the value in community and relationships with people like Momo. As with most media, there's a lot of Christian values you can pull from it, you just have to be willing to dig a little deeper sometimes. And every story ever told will always point back to the ultimate story of the Bible. Overall, Dandadan is a really good series with great characters, some phenomenal animation, and fights that will honestly keep you on the edge of your seat. It's also a very creative series in how some of the fights are handled, and it kind of reminds me of JoJo's and how the big brain strategies play out. I'd say my personal favorite aspect is the characters. I just love them all, and I think they're genuinely well written, especially for a high school shonen. Okarun is so relatable because I too was once that nerdy weird kid who had interests that everyone bullied him for, but now here I am as a perfectly functional adult. Now, to answer the question posed by the title, should Christians watch Dandadan? I'm going to say yes. I think overall it's a pretty harmless show for all the reasons I mentioned above, especially if you look at it from a Christian perspective. However, I don't want to override your own personal convictions. If you don't feel like you should watch it, then don't. I'm just giving my personal opinions on the matter. But that's all I've got to say on this topic. Feel free to jump in the comments and let's continue the discussion. While you're down there, you can also leave a comment with some other anime you think I should cover, since I want to do more videos like this for other shows and kind of turn it into an ongoing series. Before I sign off though, I do want to give a special shout out to John Bass, Trevor, Maximum Effort Max, Sean Tige, Spectral TV, Amor12321, Zeke Shine, TC Indiana, Wiki Silence, Golden Era, and everyone else who's become a member and helped support the channel this month, since it all goes back to making videos just like this. Be sure to subscribe and check out one of the two videos on screen, or both, I can't stop you, one being why I think Christians should watch anime, and the other being what the YouTube algorithm thinks you'll like.